Hi, guys. I am so happy to join you again today for my Quiet Voice Big Impact podcast. Today, I have a special guest. You have seen her from the first episode, Vicki Avila, and I am so happy that we're doing part two because part one was really, as I had mentioned in the first episode, it really was meant for Vicki to develop her um, coaching program. I'll share more about her in a minute, but it became this really sacred conversation that we both felt like it was meant to be shared. So I really appreciate Vicki giving me the opportunity to share my life update and just lessons on self-preservation. But I also wanted to give her also in this episode the opportunity to also share more about her and her life's work on peace. So welcome, Vicki.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we go into questions, I just wanted to briefly introduce Vicki, and you're welcome to expand on this. But Vicki is a peaceability coach and women's empowerment mentor whose life purpose is helping people create more peace in their lives, one heart at a time. She helps her clients go from feeling exhausted and frustrated from overgiving to feeling happier in their relationships, more confident in themselves, and invigorated with calm, sustainable energy. Sustainability, that's the key.
Yes.
Welcome, Vicki. So happy
Thank
to
you.
have this part two conversation with you.
Me too. It's always good to talk with you and wonderful to be on your podcast.
Awesome. Okay, so before we get started, do you want to share a little bit more about you and your work?
Well, I could, sure. I come from a background as a psychotherapist. I
Mm.
don't do that work anymore, but I did it for almost 25 years, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And and now I've moved more into like a coaching model, but my heart and my interests still remain the same around how can uh, how can I help people through my experience and my knowledge. How can I help people get more from where they are to where they want to be, specifically around their mental wellness, their emotional wellness, and I, as you mentioned, Jen, I'm especially interested in their peace, in
Yes.
peace in their minds, peace in their lives, and I will talk about more about that. And so, at the moment, I'm working on a program to work with people in more of a group setting. Um, I've done mostly individual work in the past,
Mhm.
and I want to be able to impact more people in the same amount of time. So I'm looking into more how I can bring this to groups of people. And I also think there's some synergy in helping one another in the group
Yeah,
that
definitely.
you don't get when it's just the one-to-one
Yeah.
as well. So my first program that I'm rolling out in terms of group work is exactly as you mentioned in the intro about helping mainly it's women I find who have a tendency to sort of deplete themselves through overgiving
Right.
and how they can and kind of lose themselves in that process through self-neglect, self-abandonment, and how
Right.
they can do some of the things that are close to both yours and my heart, which is that self-preservation, the kind of self-identity as well,
Right.
without losing the richness and the generosity that they have in their relationships, because
Okay.
that's important to generous giving people like ourselves. But how do we do that without getting lost
Yes.
uh, and not living our own lives and having our own peace of mind?
Right.
So that's what I'm really passionate about, helping some folks to do in a group kind of a way. That's my latest passion.
That's awesome. Well, that's also why I felt like this conversation was really important, especially for um, introverts, empaths, and highly sensitives, because I feel like we naturally feel other people's energy, feel people's emotions, and sometimes we take on that energy, which is really not ours, but we think because we care so deeply that we do. So it's really important. I feel like this conversation is important to be able to um, decipher what is yours to carry and what is not yours, and to be able to have a um, more of a healthy interdependent relationship with others. That way, like you said, you can still be generous with your um, spirit, but you don't have to um, overgive as a way of feeling valuable,
Exactly.
right?
Mhm.
Okay, so let's get started. So my first question is, what does peace mean to you? And why is it the driving force of your life's work?
Such a good question. Um, so to take the first part, what peace means to me, and my guess is if you ask me this question at different times, I might say different things because it's so multi-layered. But what I would say at this moment is I think of it in a couple of ways. One is um, a sense of wholeness. So, for example, in Hebrew, the word for peace is shalom, which actually more accurately translates to wholeness. So I think that captures a spirit of part of what I feel is meant by peace, kind of a feeling of integrity. I don't mean integrity like your moral values per se, although that can be part of it, but like a feeling of wholeness,
Right,
a feeling of like when I'm sitting with myself, do I feel a sense of completeness in some way or wholeness? So
right,
that's one thing I think about. And then more, maybe more mainstream, I would say, is I think of it as really a quality of being, both within oneself, a kind of inner calmness, a kind of inner steadiness, um, and then that how that translates into relationships. So it's within and between,
right,
covers that as well. So I would encompass all of that. My primary interest, of course, we can go further and further. Peace in your community, peace in your country, peace in the world. But my focus is so person to person, that I tend to focus on the smaller arenas like relationships, families, workplaces, things of that sort. But it does encompass the whole gamut.
right,
Um, but it's mainly a quality of being
right.
with yourself and being with others. And how has it become such a passion for me and the focus of my life's work? Um, I would answer that a couple ways too. One, um, I think I didn't realize it was that until probably not long before we met several years ago. Actually, maybe it was a little before that, maybe 10 years ago or so. Um, that when I was looking back on sort of the themes of my work over the years as a therapist and prior to that as a social worker and really my whole life of how I am in the world, I realized that that was kind of a central theme, that I was always wanting to bring more peace to myself, to any environment I was in, to my work, my clients, my patients. Um, Even when I worked in corporate, I that was always on my mind, like how can I bring more peace to this meeting or whatever the case was. Um, but in particular, the things that made me really hone in on that were one was a personal thing, which is I about gosh, it's been almost 20 years ago now, between 15 and 20 years ago now, my mom and my sister both died in a very short period of time,
Oh,
and both from cancer. So, and I mentioned cancer because thank God there was an organization called Cancer Care, which offered grief counseling if you had lost loved ones to cancer. So when I had this one-two punch um, in the losses, I went to see a counselor myself, at this place. And one time I was talking with her, and I tripped over my words, and I said, I was feeling like she asked me something like, "What do I want?" And I said, "I just want peace." But what I actually said was, I kind of tripped over my words, and I said, "I just want pieces." And they said, "Wait, I mean peace." And she jokingly said, "Pieces of peace."
oh, wow.
And I thought, yes, exactly. That's what I'm always wanting to bring. I want to bring a piece of peace. And that's what I'm wanting for myself in this time of great loss and grief as well. And that really like soaked into me, that moment. And then the other thing more on a professional level is I just have felt over, working with hundreds of people over the years as a therapist, um, that at a basic level, even though people brought in different kinds of issues and different kinds of life circumstances and everything, that I felt whether they use this language or not, what people were looking for is feeling at peace with themselves
Yes,
and in their lives. And that whatever we were working on in terms of the specifics was always, that was like a through line. And so I said, well, I want to make that more uh, explicit in my work and more explicit in my thinking. So that's how that sort of evolved into this near obsession, I would say. And I mean that in the best possible way.
that's beautiful. I didn't know that story about your background losing your mom and your sister. I'm sorry
Oh,
to
thank
hear
you.
that. I find that life is so mysterious that when tragedy happens, when conflict happens, it's like, of course, it's devastating in the moment, but somehow it's meant to support you for what's coming ahead.
Yes,
And that does in a way give you peace
yes,
because uh, then you remember in your spirit that things happen for your highest good, even if in the moment it feels painful and
right.
difficult. It's We have to just trust that there is something that is supporting us. And I find that, like when you were saying peace means wholeness to you, I feel like that wholeness, it it's within us, but it's also comes through us by being connected to something greater than ourselves.
Yes,
Um, because I feel like, based on my experience in my past, it's like only operating from your ego and trying to prove and trying to just do things right. Without that sense of that state of being you're referring to, without having that grounded, rooted spaciousness within your spirit, life, you can be taken over by the ups and downs of life. But
yes,
that peace, it comes, I feel like, comes from a deeper sense of trust that you are being supported, you're being held, you're being cared for,
hmm,
even if the circumstances don't look like it. There has to be a deep level of faith and trust that it is working for you. Because when I look at you and talk with you and gotten to know you over the past few years, I feel like I can feel that whatever, all the things you've gone through have created the sense of inner stability, that you can
hmm,
hold a lot because you have witnessed so much. You've
yes,
experienced so much pain. That's why you have this deep level of empathy for others.
yes,
Your capacity to hold pain, it's meant to also be a sacred holding space to hold for others.
yes, absolutely.
There's such a level of, I just, I wanted to reflect to you that you have such a deep sense of inner strength
Mm,
about you. You have a reserved energy about you, but the reserve comes from a, feels very rooted in like deep care.
mhm.
Deep care. You just want to just genuinely um, be of service to others, and I can tell you've cultivated that because you've developed that for yourself.
Yes. Well, thank you for saying that, Jen. It's nice to have that reflected back, and I would say that all resonates with me, and in particular the thing about that deep inner stability. Yes, it's from the experiences And I firmly believe it also is, it's not just from having the experiences, but having the support and the willingness. So it's both within me and, the reaching out for help to process those experiences,
Oh,
like that moment in the conversation with the counselor at the cancer
right,
care place. Just, I think there's so much pain still in people and unpeace in people from having had such similar experiences, or maybe not so similar, but still painful, that it isn't processed, and it leaves the opposite of what you were just describing. It leaves a
right,
sense of
right,
instability and
right,
and
right,
happiness and all of that.
right,
So
right.
yeah.
Well, actually, I feel like let's talk about that. How in your experience, since you have such a extensive experience in mental health, like how do you help people um, have that inner fortitude and that courage really to like face the insurmountable pain of whatever they're going through? How because we know that you have to go through it in order to receive the grace and the wisdom, right? But
Mhm.
in your experience, how have you helped people navigate that landscape?
Mhm. There's many ways in which I'd say it depends, because it depends on what's the sticking point, or what's the challenge of a particular person, or a particular inner world that a person has.
Right,
But if I could make some general statements about that, I would say in some ways it does come down to having a safe place to do that, whether it's with a therapist or counselor or coach or a group that's a safe container. Um, and so having some kind of support and help and guidance
right,
from somebody somewhere,
right,
someplace. And also, I do believe, which is why you often hear me use the word peaceability, I do believe that to some degree there's a skill building process. So sometimes, for example, in my therapy work, um, people didn't learn from their families. They weren't role modeled or coached by their parents or whatever to regulate their emotions, for example, or even to feel them or know what they were.
right,
And so sometimes it's literally helping people learn something that one would hope you could learn coming up through your family and in your life, but many times people don't. So
right,
then you have that skill. I can feel my feelings. It's not too scary. I can identify them. I can metabolize them, I often
right,
say.
right.
So some of it's, in my mind, skill building, that inner skill building. And also, you were talking about it before, and we were talking about it last time. Um, I do feel a piece of it is the inner calming that comes from really getting in touch with your worth and value as a person,
Yes.
and your belovedness as a person.
Oh, ooh, I love that. I love your belovedness as a person. Oh, I'm getting chills.
Me
Yeah,
too. We always get a lot of chills when we talk, don't we,
yeah,
Jen? Um, and then there's just something, I can feel it in my body right now, just
me
talking
too.
about, there's something about really connecting with that, which sometimes I feel has to happen in some kind of relationship
Yeah, yeah,
where
yeah,
you can be mirrored back
right,
your belovedness through the other one's eyes.
right.
That it is beyond, as you said, beyond proving anything, beyond doing anything. I need do nothing to
Yes,
be of infinite worth and value,
right.
and infinite deservedness of love or belovedness. And I feel the more I can help people connect with that. Um, that is a healing thing and peacemaking thing in itself. So I didn't want to leave that part out. It's not simply like skills of emotional regulation or something like that, but there's a deeper, like,
Yes, yes,
self-worth process too.
Yes, it's like tapping into just that soul truth that when you said belovedness, I was like, it's like when I hear that word, there's a remembrance in
Yeah,
my spirit. It's like, yes.
yeah,
And I don't know why, like, it's like when we're living in this world, we
yeah,
forget that not that just we're cared for, that we matter, but there, when you say belovedness, it feels so deep. It
yeah,
feels so rooted and still getting chills. It's just
yeah,
like that. If there's one thing that I want our audience, our listeners to take away from that is that feeling. You know,
mhm,
um, I love that this question was spontaneous. So I just love that it came through that that's what I pray for, that everyone remembers that feeling of feeling beloved, not from what you look like, and what you do, where you came from, what you accomplished, your titles, your money, your success.
right.
Belovedness is it's a timeless,
Mhm.
eternal.
Eternal, yes. It's your very nature
Yes.
is the beloved, yes.
Oh, I love this. Okay. Gosh. Ugh. Um, my next question ties into what you were saying about how your inner world is also reflected in your outer world. So how does a person's relationship with their own inner peace have a direct impact on their other like outward facing areas of their life, especially if they have a business? Because I feel like,
Mm,
based on my experience, again, as an introvert, empath, and highly sensitive, I didn't know this starting out in being an entrepreneur. I thought that logically I just need to do these steps, this, like almost like a formula. But what I realized, and that's why I feel passionate talking about sustaining yourself, it's like there has to be a deeply rooted uh, foundation within you in order to sustain yourself long term. Like I
mhm.
always talk about the turtle way. Long,
Yep,
what does that mean for you to sustain you, especially on those days where it's difficult? Because you're gonna have hard days. So
mhm.
how do you champion yourself through all of that? So I wanted us to dive deeper on like that. It's almost like so within, so without. It's like
Yeah,
whatever's going
yeah.
on inside. The world is going to reflect that. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'd love for you to just expand a little bit on that.
Sure, sure. Another great question. It's well, base my baseline belief is that the extent of our inner peace, to use the phrase the way you described it, the extent of our peace inside affects everything else, from how we handle a encounter at the grocery store with the checkout person, to our families, to how we perceive the world that's coming at us and what happens to us, and everything. So but you're challenging me in a fun way to apply that in like the business setting, like as a business owner, or business entrepreneur, or person in the business world. So um, I would say what comes to mind about that, besides the it affects everything, that's pretty general, is I feel like I'm trying to think of what order to say these in. I'll just say whichever one comes out first. Um, I do, as you mentioned earlier, I feel it infuses every encounter you have in your business.
Yes,
So whether it's when if one's has a team, how you interact with your team, how you interact with your clients, how you what's the quality of the energy that you bring to any client meeting or prospective client meeting or talk you give or anything like that. You can feel the I believe, whether even people who are less sensitive or empathic, I think that on some level, without maybe knowing it, people can feel
yes,
how how peaceful and centered and calm and present you are. And I think that the more peaceful we can be inside, the more attractive we are. So I actually think it contributes to success in business
Right. Yes.
because it's attractive. It's an attractive quality. So that's one thing. Another thing is thinking about what you and I often talk about, which is that sustainability piece as the business person, as the business owner or whatever the role is. I believe that if we have that sense of stability inside, which I think naturally comes with a greater degree of emotional regulation in a way, like we can manage the ups and downs of like, oh, I got so excited or I got so disappointed or that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
we have the capacity to hold that. Yeah.
Yeah, the capacity to hold that and work through it as needed is it it enables us to really connect with what is the right pace for us.
Yes.
And that could be different for different people. I mean, you and I are kind of similar and, we're about the turtle way, as you said. Um, but not everybody's like that. But I do think it allows you to connect in with what is the sustainable pace for me. And I would offer that for many people, the more peaceful they get, the closer to the turtle way they'll be interested in. Because it's a lot of times I think the hustle and grind is about anxiety. It
Yes.
is about, oh, I gotta keep doing and da da da. I gotta keep hustling. I gotta keep moving. What if something bad happens?
Yeah.
What if the next shoe drops? And if that all can be calmed down, I think for many more of us than might realize it,
Yeah.
might not be interested in that kind of an energy.
Right.
So I
Right.
do think that's another piece of it. I think it's a huge part of sustainability
Yeah.
and not getting burned out.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills again. The fact that you brought up the energy that you bring to your business and how if it is not rooted in something stable, it you are projecting the angst. It's like if I stop, then what's going to happen? It's like there's a based on my experience, what I felt in the past was if I stop, then nothing's going to happen. Like I guess all the weight fell on my shoulders. If I'm not doing it, if I'm not hustling, if I'm not doing it, then nothing's going to happen. Whereas
Mhm,
peace means on a grand level that you are part of a greater plan
mhm,
and your action is a part of an aligned divine plan. And when you allow yourself to surrender and trust in a force guiding you like that, you can rest when you need to rest, move when you need to move, but when you move, it's from an aligned place. It's not, I'm going to do everything and hope something sticks. It's more like,
right.
hmm, that discernment. But that discernment only comes when you actually slow down and feel into your body like, is this a yes? Is this a no? Is this a
Mhm,
wait? But again, it's like you're co-creating with life. Whatever you believe in, it's like you're allowing yourself to be led instead of you always leading and pushing and pushing. Again, that's what I would always say, push, 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 because I
mhm,
thought I had to do it. But it's like that peace comes with remembering you're a part of a bigger picture
right.
instead of I have to do it.
Mhm,
That's such a small lens in which you're operating from in this big ocean. You're just
mhm,
trying to swim upstream instead of allowing the natural ebb and flow of the ocean to carry you. Sometimes
right.
you rest, but maybe the water's still. Sometimes maybe the water's a little bit more, there's more waves than you can swim, but it's like there's an organic rhythm
Mhm,
that when we talk about this turtle wave, there's like a natural rhythm within your system, within your body. And if you
mhm,
allow yourself to move according to that, then your life will get easier. You'll actually enjoy what you're doing more. and you
Mhm.
don't feel like you're constantly on a treadmill of doing
Mhm.
and doing and doing. It's like you're not even enjoying. That's to me such a big part of peace, is enjoying what you're actually doing, right?
Exactly, exactly. And joy, and the enjoying, that quality of enjoyment comes from actually being present. We
Yes,
were talking earlier about one moment at a time before that. I think before we started recording, you know, joy is in the present moment. Joy
yes,
is, and so is peace, not over there. If I'm like doing something over here, but I'm thinking about what's the next 5 things I should be doing,
right,
should, that's another good unpeaceable word, um, then I'm not enjoying this one.
right,
And
right.
so, and the other thing I would offer to what we were both just saying and piggybacking on what you said is I would offer that those efforts that do come from that more considered discerning place of peacefulness are more impactful.
Yes,
They have more, they pack more punch in a way. They have more depth to them, so they have, that's felt out there in the marketplace. I do
right,
believe it.
right. I agree.
Um, and so one, it's a hard, sometimes a hard shift to make, to do what, can I really slow down without losing what I've built or whatever, or losing momentum. But there's a sense of, if I'm aligning and discerning and doing the things that are more that feel more right from a more resourced place, um, that I need to do less of them
Yeah,
to have the same success, the same
right,
um, result,
right,
because with more they come with more inherent energy to them, and
right.
more purposeful, more productive energy to them,
Yes,
not the frenetic anxiety of scarcity and lack and hustle.
yes, yes. There's a heart resonance, because when you get still, even though to some people getting quiet is scary, but if you allow yourself to just be in that space for yourself, even for a few minutes, you can feel when something feels true, when you feel you resonate with something, when you love something,
Mhm.
when you act from that place. It's like when you do the thing, it doesn't even feel like work. It's like
Mhm.
you're doing it, but it doesn't feel taxing. It doesn't
Right.
feel like it's attached to that story of lack. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I gotta do this, or else I'm not enough. That's where the peace comes. The peace is actually the anchor of
Yes, exactly.
right. Uh, I don't. I actually don't need that story because I feel rooted in my own self worth, my belovedness,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
in that depth of that truth, then you can feel safe to make decisions that feel in alignment with your heart, because you're like, this feels like a yes, and I'm going to do it, even though I don't see other people doing it. Even though I may go slower than other people, it doesn't matter, because I'm operating from a deep sense of truth,
Hmm.
which ultimately does help your business, because people can feel that, like you were talking about earlier, that attractiveness, that magnetism, is because
Hmm.
they feel that someone is deeply rooted in their own energy, in their own spirit, in their own inner compass. And that's,
Right.
of course, who you would like to work with, someone that has that sense of inner trust within themselves,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
So, since we're talking about like heart resonance, what are like some practical tips maybe someone can apply today, that where they can little by little just add more peace to their day, add more peace to their state of being? Can you
Mm.
give any uh just some tips that someone could apply today?
Yes. And this is one of my favorite topics, because I do think inner peace and peaceability is more accessible than we think sometimes,
Yeah.
more accessible than we give it credit for, because of these very things. So for me, and I do get very practical, and it partly it's about habit. little, like there's a lot of talk nowadays about tiny habits or little habits or atomic habits, whatever. But I think that concept really applies well here, that if somebody isn't, for example, one that came to mind just as you were talking earlier about taking a, just a moment out of the day to recenter. You said something about that earlier, and to me, that's a powerful one. If someone is not accustomed, oftentimes people who feel very unpeaceful inside, whatever words they use for that, are not people who kind of stop for moments at a time. They're not necessarily the meditators or the um, and and that's okay. But I do think there's a lot of bang for the buck in just taking, even if it's 5 minutes or less, even 2 minutes um, out of the day, 1, 2, 3 times in the day, to just get still and just listen to the breath if that's possible. Or there's apps on your phone. You can um, find a 2-minute meditation and listen, guided meditation, and listen to it, if and that's, I often, with clients, I would have, nowadays with the cell phones, I would have them like set an alarm on their cell phone. And once I got them to really agree that they could afford maybe 6 minutes a day, 2 minutes at a time, and they could tolerate that,
Right.
set the alarm on their phone and make a commitment to themselves to do that 2 minute of just nothing and just feeling their own presence
Right. Right.
and breathing. Or sometimes people can't do that so easily, so I suggest like guided meditation, whatever. And I've really seen just that make such a big difference for people who aren't accustomed to that, especially for people who are a little more accustomed to taking some time for that. I'm always encouraging them to expand it a bit. If you already are pretty good with the 2 minutes, try for five, you know. So that's one, is a big one, is just slowing down enough to feel one's own presence
Yeah.
and breathe into it. And there's a really, with the breath thing in particular, whether it's you're just following your breath or you're listening to a meditation, but you're breathing more consciously and awarely, um, there's a physiological piece to that as well, that it calms the nervous system. And that gives you the subjective experience of feeling more peace.
Mhm.
So to me, that's a huge one that doesn't require a big commitment of time, but it does require a commitment of creating a habit.
Right. Right.
So that'd be one really practical tip.
Yeah. That's really good. I feel like it's all about making micro baby steps, like make
Yes.
and then doing it consistently. That way you don't beat yourself up if you have a huge goal and you're like, oh, I missed it, forget it. But if you
Yes,
did
exactly.
it and just acknowledge, like, okay, I did a minute today, or I did 2 minutes today.
Mhm.
Just even having the desire to be more peaceful is a win.
Yes, exactly. And if it starts with even 30 seconds 3 times a day or whatever, I do. And that's one of the things that excites me so much about this specific topic. Like, what are some practical things people can do? Is that you get a lot of benefit out of a little investment for
Right,
this. There's
right,
some things where you really got to invest and make a big commitment to get to a
right,
goal. And here, the baby steps, the micro movements, the 30 seconds is, the 2 minutes is, really make a big difference
right, right.
in something really important, which is
Yeah,
your peacefulness.
yeah,
And thus maybe your peacefulness with your spouse or your family or whoever,
right,
your colleagues.
right.
um, there's a huge amount of leverage there in terms
Yeah,
of the cost benefit.
yeah, yeah. Because it builds on itself. Like whatever you did
Yes.
the previous day, you're building on that. Everything. You're never starting from zero. You're always
Exactly.
building and building.
It's
I
like, and I often describe it as like building a muscle, like people build, when they lift weights, they build muscle over time. It's like that, but it's with your inner environment, your inner,
yeah,
how peaceful is your inner environment. It's the same idea.
yeah. I love that. I think that's very doable for people. And to add to that, I feel like as you're going through your peace uh, practice, whenever you feel things like maybe harder emotions where it's hard to face, like um, do your best to feel it, and this is what I've learned. It's like just ask yourself, how can I love myself through this?
Hmm.
Even if you don't know how logically, just being curious about it opens up a space in your energy, in your spirit that okay, maybe it's possible for me that
Hmm.
I don't have to spiral into some sort of negative story, that I can somehow detach from that old story of like, if I feel heavy or if I feel anxious, then it's going to become this and then it's going to get worse. And like, if we're curious and that we just think of the possibility, I wonder what it would be like to love myself through this. Like just the act of extending grace to yourself, I feel like does wonders, you know?
Yes, yes. I think that's another great tip about gaining more peace inside, because for many reasons, but one that came to mind as you were speaking was what that does is, let's say that you're feeling some kind of painful emotion, like the what guilt or anxiety or shame or anger. Um, the to me, what you just described creates more peace inside and peaceability, because we do create new pathways as we do things
Right,
differently in our
right,
minds, right? So it creates more peace in a couple of ways. One is you interrupt the story making.
yes,
So I may be anxious at this moment about this thing, or guilty or angry or whatever. But instead of spending my attention after that starts, after the feeling comes, instead of expending my attention on, oh, and this reminds me of the 74 other times I've been mad at this other person, or oh, this always happens to, whatever that story's going to be.
right,
So that tip that suggestion that you're saying to me, it takes the attention off of that story making, so it doesn't become more than it is. It doesn't become more than the anxiety or guilt or anger of this moment. And as soon as you say a sentence like, and I can feel it in my body, as soon as you say a sentence like, how can I love myself through this, you're getting a little emotional distance from whatever this is.
yes,
Like, I feel anxious, but I am not my anxiety,
yes,
because I'm this person here asking the question, how can I love myself through this anxiety?
yes,
So it can feel like I am my anxiety in that moment. But just asking that question creates the space that leads to some peace.
yes,
um, and and then of course loving oneself through anxiety or anger or shame or whatever in that moment creates peace just on its face, that it'll calm the anxiety, or it'll reduce the heat of the anger, or it'll help you move out of the shame. I just think it's a beautiful suggestion, and it creates a lot of possibility for peace in all those ways.
yes, yes. I think that's what I want. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's what I want people to leave um, or gain from this conversation. Is like peace sounds like this big profound thing. Like I have to become so enlightened. I am peaceful, but it's just having a like you said, a state of being where you feel at ease with yourself in the moment. You know, and everyone deserves that. So you're not always going to feel peaceful throughout the day, but
Mhm.
my hope is through our conversation, it ignites and it reminds you that you are the holder of your peace. You're the one. It's we can seek things to do and people, but really you're ultimately the one that can create that peace within you and to sustain you. So
Exactly. And that it really is possible in the midst of every of our lives as they are. It doesn't require going on retreats or to the mountaintop or any of that, that it really is possible within our current reality.
yes. Well, I've loved this conversation, Vicki. Is there anything else you would like to share, or like where can people find you? Because I'm sure that some people, some listeners would like to know more about you and learn
Oh,
more about
thank
your
you.
program.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't know that there's anything else in particular I'd want to share at this moment about our subjects today, except just the deepest gratitude to get to be in continued conversation with you, Jen, and in our lives and in our friendship, and certainly in this forum. Um, and I so appreciate your thoughtful questions and the conversation and the richness of it.
Oh,
For
you're welcome. I just feel like when you initially reached out, I mean, of course I said yes to support you, and because I when we met years ago, when you first told me that your passion was peace, I felt the truth of that. I felt like, okay, yeah, I can see her doing that. And then, years later, it makes me so happy to see you like um, um, really taking off with your mission. And I'm happy to
oh, thank
support you. And I just felt that when we had that initial conversation, the first episode of the season two,
you.
um,
Mhm.
so many gems came out of that, and I was like, gosh, this does not feel like it's just for us. As much as I love our conversation, I was like, gosh, this feels like there's more that other people need to like receive the wisdom and the gems that came through. So I
Yes,
yeah.
yes. I hope it would, may it be of benefit. Absolutely. And our conversation today as well. And to answer your other question about how can people find me, well, I already mentioned earlier about my current group program that I'm developing, or developed and offering, for the woman who tends to overgive and kind of lose herself in that, whether it's home, work, in business, and how to move from that to really reclaiming one's own sense of self while sustaining the kinds of relationships that they want to have
Right.
in a healthier, maybe more balanced way. Um, and so that's something that's I'm offering, in the near future. And so if people are interested in that in particular, that's great. Or just the conversation around peace and peaceability. So the best ways to reach me at the moment are on socials. I'm mainly on Facebook. So my name there is Vicki Peyton Avila. So look me up there. It's pretty easy to find me since I stuck my maiden name or my birth name in there, Vicki Peyton Avila on Facebook. And then can I give my email address as well?
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
okay? Okay. So my email address is, not surprisingly, peace, Peace, dot ability, Ability. So peace dot ability for the number four, life at gmail.com.
Okay, great. Awesome. Um, is there one piece of advice you wanted to share, especially for our fellow introverts, empaths, and highly sensitives out there, in regarding to peace? That's just what's coming through right now.
Oh, sure. Let me just ponder that a second. Well, this what's coming up, I feel like could be a whole nother conversation. So maybe we could do another episode sometime. But I'll just share what came, which is, we didn't talk about it really today, but I think especially for the introverts, highly sensitive, and empaths, a big component of peace, and I certainly have experienced this for myself and with many a client, um, is that learning to tease out what's mine and what's not mine.
Right.
So it's so easy to be porous or sponge-like in terms of other people's energy, and then to take on their other people's unpeace, so to speak,
Yes.
their and whether it's that we then want to fix it for them, or even if we've kind of learned not to do that, we can still take it on inside
Yeah.
and can become our unpeace. I do think, especially for that type of person with with our kind of wiring, that's a big one. Is almost, I think of it almost as like internal boundaries,
Yes.
that really get having very healthy, or developing very healthy internal energetic boundaries,
Yeah.
allows for a great deal more peace in the likes of us
Yeah.
introverts,
Yeah.
empaths, and highly sensitives than most anything else, actually.
Yeah.
So that's why I said it could be a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. But since you asked, that's a big one, I feel, is like learning and discerning what's mine and what's not mine, so that I only have to really kind of tend my own garden and not
Right.
other people's.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely, well, maybe have to do another episode on diving even deeper on that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that today that we touched on, seeing yourself as beloved and that you're worth those boundaries. You're worth whatever you need to honor your own self preservation, and then just doing small, tiny steps to whatever that looks like for you to cultivate that peace. It's just starting off simple and letting each seed that you plant, like, build on itself. And then eventually you'll see, like, wow, I've actually grown a beautiful garden or harvest of like my own peace.
Yes. Yes. Amen.
Thank you, Vicki. I have loved our conversation, always love our conversations. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
oh, you're so welcome. I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation. And I look forward to connecting with all of you soon. Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye, everybody.